Welcome back to the Autoblog podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. Joining me today is senior editor for All Things Green, John Snyder. What is up?
Hey, I'm just hunkered down during this crazy storm we're having right now.
Apparently it's heading east. You're out in Ann Arbor, and it just kept on going towards me, and it's wild. I actually just pulled the umbrella down from the picnic table because I was a little bit afraid it might get airborne. But the weather will pass. This too will pass, and we can talk about electric cars. If you're listening to this, you've probably already read John's story about the Volkswagen ID.4 versus the Ford Mustang Mach-E. Can't wait to talk about this. I've actually driven both these things. So you wrote the Comparo, and I've basically spent a couple of weeks in the spring driving each one of these. I don't think it was back-to-back weeks, but it was fairly close together. Super psyched. I remember I had a good pizza actually each time I drove one of these cars. We won't do a pizza verdict, but we'll save some of that detail. I drove the 4Runner, which if we're thinking forward with the electrics, the 4Runner is definitely a step back in time.
Yeah.
You had the Escalade diesel, which is kind of a little bit of all worlds there. Forward, Escalade, then you get the diesel, but I digress. And then you went off-roading in the Palisade. Not our long-term Palisade, but your specific long-term Palisade.
Correct.
So that's fun. We'll run through some news. I wrote an opinion piece this week on John DeLorean. What if he ran General Motors?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
It's crazy. So check it out. I'd love to hear your feedback on this one. Get in the comments, mix it up. A couple of really good Netflix documentaries out there about him in the last couple of years. And that's what kind of piqued my interest. Crazy concept from Audi. And let's get into it. Mach-E versus ID.4. I'm just kind of curious, initial impressions. You've kind of got like the Mach-E, which is a little bit of a rock star, if you will, as far as looks. ID.4 could be electric, might not. Hard to say. So they've definitely approached a similar mission from different ways. What was kind of like your just feel from aesthetically of these two things?
Well, the Mach-E was the one that got the attention in the parking lots. I had people come up and ask me about it. It's a little bit mixed. There's still a few holdouts out there. They're I don't know about a Mustang crossover. They're not so worried about it being electric. It's the crossover format that throws them off a little bit. But most people were really receptive to it. The ID.4 is flies under the radar a little bit more. It's still new enough that people are kind of like, what's that? It's very tidy looking and very nice. Inside it's very sleek and modern. The Mach-E inside is with that big screen there, it's almost a little futuristic here and there, but with some sports car touches. Definitely the Mach-E was getting the most impression. I was driving, I should specify, I was driving the Mach-E California Route 1, so the long-range rear-wheel drive version, and the ID.4 Pro S, so the long-range rear-wheel drive version. I like them both a lot, quite a bit. Spoiler alert, if you haven't read the article, I came down in favor of the Mach-E. It just, it's more fun, in a straight line. It's fast. It's about, a good second or so faster to 60 miles an hour. I love that tech interface, way better than what I had used on the Tesla Model 3. Plus you've got, with both of these, you do have a small, little sliver of a digital instrument cluster in front of you. So, but despite, the Mach-E having a lot of things buried in menus, I found it pretty easy to poke around and change things. And there's a lot of optimization and customization you can do within those menus, which I appreciate quite a bit. The ID.4 starts a little cheaper. It is about almost like $5,000 cheaper. Starts about 45, while the Mach-E California Route 1 starts about 50. Before rebates. But the ID.4 has heated seats, which this Mach-E didn't. It had a power passenger seat, which the Mach-E didn't. It had an auto opening trunk, which the Mach-E didn't. It had a power screen for the sunroof, which the Mach-E didn't. But they're so similar in a lot of other ways in terms of space. They're very, very similar in terms of space, except the Mach-E's got a frunk. It's got a pretty big frunk, while the ID.4 just has, mechanicals underneath the hood. But the ID.4 does have a little bit more interior cargo space to make up for it. Both back seats are about the same size. And the one thing that I really liked about the ID.4, though, was the way it handled and its steering. It was very sharp turn-in, really quick to react. I was driving down the road at one point, and there was something that looked like it could mess up my tires in the road, that sort of snuck up on me, and I was able to dodge it real quick. Real snappy, very little body roll. The Mach-E feels a little bit, when you try and turn that nose at speed, it feels a little bit like a boat that hasn't started planing yet. It's just a little bit sluggish in throwing its weight around. And the ID.4 is just, I feel like it transitions from corner to corner better. It was very, very close. They're both very good, ride and drive. Very close in a lot of ways. I came down in favor of the Mach-E for, driving assistance tech. It has, better advanced driver assistance system and speed. It's a lot more fun to blast around town, and it's a little tail happy, and it's fun. It's a hoot.
It's interesting because I drove both these cars separately, not necessarily with the intention of doing a comparison, whereas you did, that's kind of how we do this. When somebody's going to do a compare, it's like, hey, you're comparing them. But I mean, it's inevitable. Like literally I drove them pretty close together, in fact, and just the comparisons, like I said, are so inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you. The Mach-E, like a nose ahead, it's a little bit more fun. The infotainment is better. I think I actually was a little annoyed with the Volkswagen infotainment.
Yeah, it's a little sluggish and just not as robust.
I almost in some ways can't totally pin that on, because these cars, to me, their mission is like to be the standard bearers as electric vehicles for Ford and Volkswagen right now. Mm-hmm. So in a way, it's kind of like you're quibbling over the infotainment. But if you're going to get really granular here, people are cross-shopping. It's like, well, yeah, Ford's is better. That one is good. And I actually really like the interior of the Mach-E. It was, to me, very simple, not at all retro. Like to me, the actual, like the Mustang interiors right now are still very retro. The big gauges, the vents. This is none of that. This could be an Audi for all you know. It's like screens and then empty real estate. And I loved it. I was like, hey, this is a step forward. Sign me up for this. Whereas the Volkswagen felt like a Volkswagen, which is fine, but to me, the Mustang evoked a little more passion, literally from stem to stern, from the design, from the interior, from the infotainment. To your point, I thought it did handle a little better. It's a little more sorted and tuned to be like sporty. It lives up enough to the idea of a Mustang that you can credibly put that horse on the car and not get too many people upset. Someday I would love to see a true coupe electric Mustang.
Oh yeah,
but
for sure.
For now, this is This is good for me.
Yeah, I mean, until they figure out how to make batteries smaller so they can, have the car,
Yeah.
ride a little bit lower and still have, room for your feet and your legs inside the car. The crossover format is the way it's going to be a lot of the time. Another thing I should mention that this Ford has a big advantage over the Volkswagen is range. This Mach-E, the California Route 1, is rated at 305 miles, while the ID.4 Pro S is 250. So you're getting an extra 55 miles. For most, use cases, that's not going to matter. You're not going to drive that much in a day. But especially when you're trying to get a first-time EV buyer who hasn't figured out, that that range anxiety goes down quite a bit once you get used to getting the car. That extra 55 miles of range is a big selling point for especially new time EV drivers.
Yeah, I think, I mean, to put it really simply, right now, if you're looking as far as like, what kind of, which EV do you want? Range anxiety is a thing because maybe you're new to the technology. You want to know, hey, I mean, to get where I'm going, I don't have to worry about charging until I get to like a charging point or maybe your home. And, it just depends on how much of like the lifestyle you want to really adapt to. I mean, for me,
Yeah.
I found charging both these things like just I loved doing it. I was like, this is fun. I like charging my my electric vehicle when I get home. I it was interesting. I drove both of these in like probably early to mid winter.
Yeah.
So it was like I was still had like some Christmas decorations in the way that I had just pulled down and they were like at the front of the garage. Like, I gotta move this box over here and string this cord over here. And experience them in the cold was, obviously an interesting thing as well. What else separated them, I think, in your mind? I'm curious.
Um, just their general styling and interfaces inside the Mustang. There's hard buttons like you're used to. In the ID.4, it's a lot of touch sensitive pieces of plastic. Um, so you're sliding your finger across a piece of plastic that doesn't move with your finger instead of turning a dial or hitting an up or down button. Which I don't know. To me, I think it's neat. It looks cool. It's just harder to be precise when you're like trying to turn up the volume to a certain level. It's your finger kind of slides around on the thing, and there's really no real reference for how it should. There's no haptic feedback on the buttons on the steering wheel for like audio controls and things like that, and cruise control on the ID.4. There is a little haptic feedback. It gives a little vibration or a little tick to let you know that it almost feels like you're pressing a button, but the thing actually doesn't really depress under your thumb. So that was I thought it was neat in the ID.4. I definitely thought the Mustang was more practical in that way. Also, the Mach-E, you can use your phone as a key, which is kind of neat, and it was super easy to set up. It was just like 2 steps. And so little things like that. There's lots of little things in the Mach-E menus. You can choose the when you use adaptive cruise control, you can set it to the speed limit, and it'll change when the speed limit changes. It'll change the car's speed, and you can set a tolerance. Say I want to drive 5 miles over the speed limit, whether it's 55 or 65. And so if I'm in a 55 zone, I'm going 60. and I hit 70 miles an hour zone, it'll adjust the speed to 75 miles per hour, which is kind of cool. You can set it over or under, which is just a really nice little thing that I wish I had on my vehicle, our Palisade. It will follow the speed limit if you have the cruise control set to the speed limit, but it doesn't have that tolerance like the Mach-E does. The Mach-E also has really good lane following, lane centering, while the ID.4 did not. There's just lots of little things like that just make the Mach-E experience richer and better and more personalized.
One thing I found interesting, and I sort of just realized this, is the Mach-E is larger. I actually, in my head, sort of dimensionally assumed the Volkswagen was actually larger, but the Mach-E is about 5 inches longer. So, to me, the Mach-E didn't drive like this. It drove credibly like a Mustang crossover, I would say. Whereas, the ID.4 felt kind of more like a Volkswagen smallish to mid-sized crossover. So, it's some of the things aren't maybe as apparent as they might seem, because my initial impressions were, hey, you want the fun, the party car, get the Mach-E. You want maybe the crossover, get the ID.4, but that's not exactly true. The Mach-E is a little bit bigger, and it's got a little bit more range, and it drives a little bit better. So I frankly would have the same conclusion that you reached, and I see why you reached it.
Yeah. I mean, I would be happy with living with either of these, but knowing that the Mach-E's out there and how much fun it is and how, the personal touches, it'd just be hard to choose that over the ID.4 for me, even though the ID.4 is, less expensive.
Yeah. So, check out John's story. It's up on the site. By the time you're listening to this, it's actually been up for a little while. But do check that out. Please send us, get some comments in there, tweet at us. We always love feedback on our comparison tests. So let's talk about the Toyota 4Runner. I had this one just recently. This is the TRD Pro. Mine stickered for about $48,000. It was kind of like different shades of gray and black throughout. So really kind of a stealthy vehicle, looked good, had the Yakima rack on top. So that just really, looked like I was ready to go, get something. And it's, it looked the part of the 4Runner, that's for sure. I always have a soft spot for the 4Runner. I think it's so much fun to drive.
Yeah.
And I just had a blast with it, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, it feels so old, but not really. I mean, some things are dated, but it feels like such a classic, and it's a hoot to drive, and it's super capable. It's a very capable vehicle off road, and I think it looks cool too. It just looks tough and looks purpose built. I like it quite a bit.
Here's something that I it's always good to question your assumptions. If you were going to take a guess, which would you say is the longest vehicle? The Bronco, the 4Runner, or the Wrangler? And for considering it's a 4Runner, we'll consider 4 doors.
Bronco?
No, it's actually the 4Runner, which does confirm what I thought. But as far as like the longest, like lengthwise, it's 190 in length, or 191 for the 4Runner. It's 188 for the Wrangler, and then it's 189 for the Bronco. Now, length can mean, it doesn't necessarily mean anything, but other dimensions, they're somewhat similar here. Like, we're talking like, let's see, the width is 76 for the 4Runner, inches, by the way, 74 for the Wrangler, and up to 79 for the Bronco, which I did recently drive the Bronco. It's a very squat type vehicle. I think you could actually sort of maybe feel that a little bit. But this is a kind of a long, sort of geeky way of saying I always just kind of assumed the 4Runner was a little bit bigger than the Wrangler. And a lot of times we
Yeah.
didn't necessarily really like it would be like, well, the Wrangler is its own thing. It's more like, push it against the G class or something. The 4Runner is this like kind of bouncy, larger SUV thing, which, and I've driven a lot of 4Runners. I don't even exactly know where I kind of got that idea in my head, but they're pretty close in size. But to me, the 4Runner just still feels like more of a larger vehicle. You get inside and it feels like there's more space. I had no trouble throwing a car seat in there. This one in the TRD Pro trim was a little bit off the ground, which was just awesome. Like you want to be like the rock star with like, your kid pull up in this thing and he's like, hey, let's go. Where are we going? Climbing this, up the running boards. But to your point, John, it's pretty old. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
5-speed transmission. I mean, that's literally half the number of gears the Bronco has.
Right.
I mean, if you're talking about 270 horsepower, that actually is the one area I would complain a little bit. Like last year, 2 years ago, when all you're doing is maybe being cross-shopped with the Wrangler, you can fight the Pentastar V6 with that, because Jeep people and people who are truly doing powertrain analyses, yeah, they'll look at like that 4-cylinder turbo. They'll maybe look at the diesel in the Wrangler. And now the Wrangler will literally offer you everything from a Hemi V8 to a plug-in hybrid.
Yeah.
So it's like,
awesome.
It's whatever you want it to be. But, the 4Runner, to me, that powertrain, and it reflects the fact that it's an old vehicle. And I mean, like merging on the expressway, you're like, okay, we're halfway down the on-ramp. We're going to really put this thing to the floor so we get some like a tailwind here. That to me is definitely an area you could improve, like get over 300 horsepower, maybe make it a little more torquey. I realize these are just like, you're either taking it off road, in which case horsepower really doesn't matter that much. You've already got all the gear you need, the off-road gear, or you're just doing like kind of suburban cruising, in which case, again, 270 horsepower is about the same. Some of these Broncos and Jeeps, I think, actually are a little bit overpowered, if you will. They're a riot to drive. Let me back up and put that out there. But it's a little bit of a dated powertrain. But I mean, just the rest of it, love the looks. And, they've done some things over the years to keep the interior just a little bit, updated. I mean, to me, if you ask me emotionally, which of those three do you want? I mean, metrically, I think I just said the 4Runner is the Bronco is the best of the bunch because it handles the best on the road with that independent front suspension.
Yeah.
To me, that handles the best. But then Jeep is always going to be Jeep. But then for me, just my like illogical mind loves the 4Runner. So that's how I put them all together if I were going to spend some money. So, and this one would be pretty close to what I would get. I wouldn't get the Yakima rack. I don't need that. But 48 grand, the average new car vehicle was 42 in July. Seems like a pretty good deal to me.
Yeah, not bad. And for something that, has a reputation, it'll stand up. You can have that forever.
But yeah, nice interior. But obviously now that I've sort of put my like, just positive part, they need to do some work on this thing as far as like the powertrain. I'm not a big fan of Toyota's infotainment system. That
Agreed.
it's not great, Bob, but there's no deal breakers here. I mean, if you're just like, which one do you like? 4Runner could easily be the one you come down with,
Yeah, I wouldn't fault anyone for choosing any of those for, whatever reasons they have for them. They all offer something different, and there's not much else out there to pick from. If you're going that very, specific route of looking for something that's really off-road capable.
It's true. What, I believe, if I'm remembering right, your family's like Land Cruiser, like back in the day.
Yeah, my dad had a couple Land Cruisers.
Nice.
Back when I was learning to drive, he had one, and that was cool. Didn't do a lot of off-roading in it that I recall. But then I started going off-road when I got my sister's Blazer as a hand-me-down, and then I got a Jeep Cherokee, and then I started going off-road like crazy.
So, did you go off-roading in the Hyundai Palisade?
Yes, I did, sort of.
Kind of an awkward transition, but hey.
No, yeah. So I was off for 2 weeks, and we spent a lot of our time up north at our cottage, which is a little south of Sheboygan, Michigan, Lake Huron side of the state. If people are unfamiliar. And one day we ran into town because there's really nothing near us for 20 miles. So we ran into town to get some groceries. And on the way back, my wife was driving, and I was poking around with the map, and I noticed that there was all these little trails off to the side of the highway that were actually on the car's navigation system. And we said, hey, let's see how far we can go. We went down these little two-track trails through these big mud holes, and it's super, super sandy there too. But yeah, we got this thing super dirty. We got funny looks from dudes in their side-by-sides saying, like, what are you doing with a Hyundai on these trails? But it was great. It was fun, and didn't really have any hairy spots where we thought we were going to get stuck, despite being in sand that was under like a foot of water. It was really fun, just sort of exploring these little trails. They're sort of seasonal little recreational trails. And some of them, it tried to route us down private trails too, so we had to back up for a ways. There was no way to turn around, so we just had to go back, which was fine with the good parking cameras and stuff. It was super easy to maneuver out of there, and didn't even have to hit the all-wheel drive, like the diff lock button at all. And it's really fun. We'll definitely be doing more of that. Gonna end up with some Arizona pinstripes on the Palisade, probably prematurely, but I mean that's why we have it. We have it so we can go up there and bring our stuff and get to places, and it's really good for that. It was a lot of fun. I was surprised with how confident it felt. Pretty far off the beaten path, and it was my wife. It was her like first time doing some of that kind of driving and stuff, and she was a natural. It's a good car for it. We love it.
So I'm curious, do you have a 20? We should back up here. Autoblog has a long-term 21 Hyundai Palisade.
Right.
John took it to the Outer Banks of North Carolina.
Uh-huh.
We've all been going through the Palisade here. I'm literally ready to go steal it from somebody. I missed that vehicle.
Yeah.
But John's family they were like, hey, this is great. We need a vehicle. And they went out and bought their own Palisade.
Yeah. Well, almost exactly the same as our long-termer. Yeah. The all-wheel drive calligraphy.
Calligraphy, sorry, I have to jump in here. I think that is like the most stellar trim on the Palisade. Just the interior features you get, I think it's a home run.
Yeah, at first I was, when we were looking, we were like, we don't need like the quilted leather. We don't need
but the quilted leather is so
headliner.
Nice. Yeah, the headliner is nice.
But it was like, gosh, it's really not much more expensive than how we would equip a the next trim down, the limited, I think. Mm-hmm. It was like pretty much the same. It was almost the only thing I don't like about the calligraphy is I'm not a fan of those wheels. I'm not a fan.
Oh, interesting. I like the wheels. Okay.
That wheel design. It's too busy for me.
Interesting. But I like those wheels.
cat doesn't mind it, and yeah. So I mean, it's her daily driver. So
Yeah.
and yeah, we're really happy with it. We've put a ton of miles on it already too. Just going up north and back and driving all around and taking the kids places, and it's serving us really, really well. We're very comfortable in it. My son might be a little too comfortable in it. Is his part of the car is always a disaster with like dino toys and things like and snacks and stuff. But yeah, it's a perfect family vehicle for us. The only thing I could ask for would be, some form of electrification, and that of course would come with more cost. But yeah, for something, we sacrifice a bit on fuel economy. We're used to the car it replaced was a smaller diesel crossover that was easily get 35, even up to like 38 miles per gallon on the highway. That was nice. That's the hardest part, I think, to give up. But we just needed more space, and everything about the car, we just love it.
Nice. I think in a few years, just vehicles like this, you're going to be able to get like some sort of light hybrid, maybe even not a light hybrid, a plug-in.
Well, 2024, Hyundai will be launching a Palisade sized, sized EV, full EV. So that might be in our
Sounds
future.
good to me.
We'll probably hold on to this one for a long time. We tend to hold on to cars for a long time. But by the time it comes to replace this one, there's going to be some more options that will fit our lifestyle even better.
I think in some ways that's where I'm a little reticent to go run out and buy a car, even though we've been already thinking about upgrading from our like family truckster. Because I'm curious, like plus with all like the different like tax incentives and rebates that are being like literally considered on like the floor of Congress, like the whole like financial equation could change, in like a week, a month, a year. So.
And seeing the way the costs are coming down, I mean, the like look at the the Maverick's a hybrid, but the F-150,
the Lightning's a screaming deal, man.
Yeah, it's promising for those of us who want to buy an EV but have been wary of the cost, of the upfront cost. Future's looking a little bit brighter in that way.
What's encouraging about the Lightning is that's a pretty standard F-150 in many ways. Make that an Explorer or an Expedition, same price point. Doesn't have to have all the bells and whistles, but give me that powertrain and sign me up. That's my next family hauler. I mean, that's where you start to really mainstream it and get it to, where it could be like the Palisade or something where it's funny you mentioned like cleaning it up with like your son with the dynos. Like when I handed that thing off to our consumer editor, Jeremy Korzeniewski, who was very excited to come up here and get it, he dropped off a Supra and he was, after driving up here, he was like, get me out of the Supra. My back is killing me. 75 is not the road to drive a Toyota Supra on. He was looking forward to the Palisade. Long story short, I actually spent like a day cleaning the Palisade after like a month plus of family use. Like, oh my gosh, it's like the dog's little cocoon. Like, she's a golden retriever, so she just sheds more fur in a day than most dogs have in like their lifetime. Oh my gosh. But one thing that was great about the 4Runner is this, for whatever reason, this TRD Pro had like the rubber floor mats.
Yeah.
So you just literally pull those things out, turn the hose on, food, wrappers, barf, whatever you got to clean up, you could be solved with a hose. So
Yeah, that's one thing we got in this Palisade. The one we bought is it has the rubber floor mats.
Nice. That's a good move.
Yeah, it's easier, definitely easier to clean out. Just because the dog hair just sort of weaves its way into the fabric, and especially if our dog Chimmy, his white hairs. He's black and white. His white hair specifically is very I don't know, stringy, and it just gets stuck in between the fibers, and it's hard to get out. But yeah, if I can just pull off those formats and the wind will blow it away. It's quite nice.
I'm always amazed how dog hair can find its way anywhere into a car, and also anywhere like in your life. Like I'll like literally be like, I'll pour a cup of coffee and I'm like, oh, there's some fur in there. Okay. Just skim that out and away we go. But
yeah, I don't even have to take the dog near a car for it to get dog hair in it. Just hitches a ride on our clothes and our luggage.
Well, speaking of family haulers, you had the Escalade diesel. Can wrap up the reviews section here. A few quick thoughts on that. This is interesting. I drove the Suburban diesel and I drove the Yukon, I think it was the XL diesel actually. So this now completes the hat trick here of large General Motors diesels as far as the body on frame SUVs, the really big ones anyway. What did you think of it?
It was funny. I was my first time getting in it and driving it. I was just down the road to take my son to karate, and I uttered just at the end of our street. I was like, "No, I don't like it."
Really?
And he was like, "Why don't you like it?" I'm like, "It's too big. It's too big." But I don't know. After driving a little bit more, it's definitely an improvement over the last one. Big time. It just feels the quality is just it's so much nicer. The diesel engine, it struggles a little bit. It's nice and torquey. It's got some
very torquey,
really good down low torque. It's 277 horsepower and 460 pound-feet of torque. But yeah, like getting on the highway or something, it runs out of steam real quick. But it's also got Super Cruise, which works really well. So that's fun to use on the highway. I've driven the updated Super Cruise in the Bolt EUV, and now I'm testing it in this Escalade. But yeah, 277 horsepower for something that huge. It doesn't have staying power. It's got grunt down low, which it needs because it's just so big, so heavy. But I don't know. It's kind of I like the thought of it. I love the idea of an inline, an i6 diesel. And I don't know. It's just it doesn't really, and it doesn't really feel or sound like a diesel.
So I like that actually. I thought that was kind of made it a little more natural.
Yeah, it's a little smoother. Yeah, in sound, than other diesel engines I've used. But I don't know. Yeah, because some of those, a lot of them are pretty quiet, especially a lot of the turbo 4 diesels are nice and quiet, and then there are others like it was like 2 years ago, maybe we had a diesel Wrangler at the office, and that thing was loud.
That was a torquey ride, I thought. I also thought it had a similar, like, it didn't have enough steam as far as being on the expressway, though. Like, good around town with all that torque, but then it's like, you got to really get moving on the, on the highway.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a
Yeah.
diesel thing too.
It
Yeah.
is. It is.
Yeah.
But I really like the interior. I really like those curved OLED displays. They're
Yeah.
beautiful,
Yeah.
and yeah, they're deployed in a very sort of creative way with one sort of behind another, and so there's different digital readouts off to the side, and um, it all looks really nice, and everything sort of has a nice space for it on these screens. It's well utilized. I like that quite a bit. Um, and then yeah, it's just super spacious inside. Wally really felt like a king uh, back there with the rear seat entertainment and the captain's chairs and tons and tons of space. It was but yeah, it's big. It's big, and it's um, I don't know. It's a little sluggish with that diesel.
We had the Suburban diesel around the holidays. It's crazy how fast this year has gone by. And this was actually kind of in the midst of like yet another wave of COVID. There was again not a lot to do at that point, if I remember it right.
Mm-hmm.
And we like lived in the Suburban for a while. Like we took it to light shows. It was like, hey,
Yeah.
let's go to the one 40 miles away. We'd put the dog back there and she could walk around the back.
Uh-huh.
And she's a big dog.
Yeah.
So when like your dog is taking a lap around the back, it's a big vehicle. It's a large vehicle. Let me put it that way. And I think that's where like things like the Palisade can make inroads, if you will, to use kind of a bad cliche. It's because they handle so much better than these large, like truck-based SUVs. If you want this, then nothing else will do, for sure.
Right.
Like if this is your recipe, eat it up. If it's not, then obviously there's a lot of other options for you. I like it. I could see myself maybe like doing a Tahoe or something. Mm-hmm. I don't think my lifestyle would ever need a Suburban, but you do get a lot more space back there than you used to. Suburban, Escalade, Yukon XL.
Yeah.
Because they did put an independent rear suspension on these things for the new generation. A lot more room back there. I remember we used to go camping in, Autoblog for some reason had a bunch of Tahoes in the spring, like 18, 17, 18. And I literally, or maybe they just kept coming my way. I don't know, but we camped in one and it was fine. But this was even like, I feel like before kids and the dog. And we were still like, we filled this thing up pretty easily, whereas now it's like, there's room back there in these large GM vehicles. And, for what they are, they're the rock stars of the large, vehicle segment. And General Motors has a very large sales edge, I believe, just taken their portfolio as a whole. And, they kind of in some ways own the market. But what I think is interesting is you're like, I like the Escalade, but I'd like it to be a little bit smaller. Maybe like a mid-size Escalade to round out that Cadillac lineup. Might be a good idea here, Cadillac. You want to fight the Navigator or the Aviator or go down the food chain a little bit? Might be a good idea.
Yeah.
So,
but that Escalade definitely has presence.
Indeed. When I had the Yukon, one of my neighbors was like, "You're looking pretty presidential today."
And, the new Yukon and Suburban, they just look fantastic.
I love
see
the
them
lights.
in parking lots, and I just think they look really nice. They've got a nice profile.
All right, so that's the review section. And since we're talking about GM, let's talk about one of our more recent columns written by me. Usually on the podcast, I try to pick somebody's brain about what their recent column was, but my number came up this week. It was my turn to kick off our third batch. I'll say this, if there's any topics you really want us to get really opinionated on, whether it's on the podcast or just explore it in written form, drop me a line, drop us a podcast line at podcast@autoblog.com. But I took a kind of an alternate history approach here with my most recent column. I posed the question, what if John DeLorean ran General Motors? Kind of wild, right? It's interesting. Your family goes back to this era of GM. I mean,
my grandpa, sort of worked alongside ish. Like my grandpa was at Oldsmobile,
Yeah.
general manager of Oldsmobile at the time, and so they were under the GM umbrella, but
Yeah.
they were all the different divisions were competing against one another then too, which was
Yeah.
it sort of made it an exciting time for GM. They had a lot going on. When you're trying to outdo the others in your own company, good things are bound to come from it.
And maybe in some ways you should have written this column because you're like literally 1 degree of separation here as far as like sort of knowing the guy. What do you think? I'm curious. You think had he stuck around, what do you think would have happened?
I don't know. I think you got it. I think you got it kind of right. That I don't know if he would have liked it all that much, getting bogged down in the running of the whole operation. He wanted to design cars.
Mhm.
He would have definitely liked the spotlight on him. But I don't know. He was a pretty passionate guy, and yeah, I think he could better express that passion as yeah, leading a single brand, or in the design studio.
He, so what piqued my interest is I was watching one of the newer Netflix documentaries called Myth and Mogul. Pretty good if you got some time. There's frankly
Mhm.
not a ton of stuff on TV right now. Football hasn't really started. Check it out. It's pretty good, and I learned a lot about the guy. Um, there's a lot of parallels between DeLorean and Elon Musk. I think that's natural.
Yeah,
People have been making those comparisons for years. Um, but I mean, what's interesting to me though, and this is where like my sort of touchstone was he was really close to actually running GM. This isn't
yeah,
like a hypothetical. He was vice president of like cars and trucks, which is like everything. That
yeah,
would be the equivalent of like Mark Royce, who's president of
hmm
GM right now.
yeah,
Like the number two, three, somewhere in there. And he did run Chevy and Pontiac, which were bigger than they were bigger back then than the entire company is right now. Let's put it
right.
that way, which is still pretty big. Um, so he's closer than people think. And I actually also, the Back to the Future movies, obviously the DeLorean car is iconic. I knew a little bit about him, but not as much as maybe some people do, if you will. Like I kind of approached it as more like, car things on Netflix. Let's check this out. And the more I like sort of learned, or in some cases were like refreshed on, just the more intrigued I became, because again, it's not exactly some like footnote to history where it's like, oh, this guy worked at GM. Wouldn't it be cool if he ran it? Like, wouldn't it be cool if Elon Musk ran Mercedes? Well, yeah, it would be interesting, but it never ever came close to happening.
Hmm.
Whereas this couple things change course, who knows? So I mean, I don't know. Like you said, John, I think you summed up my point pretty good, which is, he might have, run things for a bit. Had he made it to that point, he probably would have probably ended up being more conformist than he became in other, out on his own. Probably would have run the show for 5 years. You would have read his obituary in Automotive News in 2005, and it would have just been another, dead guy from GM. As
Hmm.
it is, he became this cultural icon, and it's wild. I
Yeah.
mean, I actually, this is maybe I'm showing my like Michigander bias here. I always somehow put him in like the Hollywood bucket, and
Hmm.
I, for justifiable reasons. Then I'm like, reading more on him. I'm like, this guy went to Cass Tech. He went to Michigan. He went to Lawrence Tech.
Hmm.
Like, this guy was like, you know, born and raised in Michigan. Not that that matters at all, but like, he was like archetypal GM,
Yeah.
as much before he went like on his own, So I don't know, that part of it I found very interesting. It led me down this what if road. So,
Yeah. He was a true and legitimate car guy.
yeah.
Just sort of larger than life, which with larger than life characters running things, it's always a crapshoot. You just don't know. You don't know whether they'll be too concerned in the details and try and manage every brand, or will they let them have their own freedom to explore ideas and stuff like that. And also, the personalities like that, not everyone gets along with them. And that could be a big problem, as Tesla sometimes finds out. But I don't know. Depending on how rock star you get, just know that might not matter at all. Just
Indeed.
Your presence is all that's needed. Have someone else do the nitty gritty.
If you can pull it off, then you can pull it off. That's kind of how it works, I guess. It reminds me of like Bob Lutz, a little bit of Henrik Fisker, Elon Musk. And these are all like definitely different versions of similar types of characters. Obviously, they all took different paths. So, interesting times. Man, it would have been fun to have a beer with like your grandpa and John DeLorean at some point 50 years ago. But
I'm not certain that they got along all that well, or were very compatible.
Yeah,
they were very different people.
Yeah, that DeLorean left GM in '73. That is what I've been kind of researching now, and it sounds like he sort of was told to leave. Although in one of the this is where personality can really, compensate, if you will. Like, depending on what you read, he either left or was told to leave or whatever you believe. The more things I read, it sounds more like it was kind of like you might want to leave sort of thing. But he, there's New York Times things where he like told people like, hey, I'm leaving because I want to leave, and he just rewrote history. So, yeah. So this Audi SkySphere concept, what do you think of this thing?
It's neat. It's basically its party tricks that can change its wheelbase by about 10 inches. But yeah, it's a electric vehicle. It's very sleek looking, very nice looking. It's going to be at Pebble, and it looks really cool. 2-seater. But yeah, it has a wheelbase that can extend or contract based on the kind of driving you want to do. You want to tackle some tight like tail of the dragon type of road. You go with a smaller footprint, and you want to stretch out on you're bombing along the interstate for days at a time, some sort of grand tour. Stretch it out. But yeah, it's pretty neat stuff from Audi. A lot of digitalization, and I think it just looks cool. But yeah, that it's that adjustable wheelbase that's the big party trick.
This is one of the more far out things I've seen in a while. Just the idea of, hey, adjust the wheelbase. So that's what I love about concept cars, and I think Monterey is a very interesting place to do it. I think without auto shows, maybe you see this at New York or something in a normal year. But hey, sure, throw it at Monterey. Makes a lot of sense.
I think I doubt we'll be seeing a adjustable wheelbase Audi anytime soon.
No.
But it's kind of a clever way to gauge public opinion of whether they like the shorter wheelbase or longer wheelbase format of the car.
Yeah, it's adaptable, DeLorean-esque.
Yeah, but yeah, it looks really cool, and rear wheel drive, 623 horsepower, 553 pound-feet of torque. And it's really, really low slung, with a lot of the weight over the rear axle, and it just sounds like it would be have some really fun driving dynamics, especially in that short wheelbase format.
Yeah, all that power. Sign me up for that.
Yeah.
Cool.
So we're going to be seeing more things like this from Audi. There's going to be a grand sphere and an urban sphere coming out in the coming months. And one of them is the grand sphere is they've sort of teased it, but it looks like a really another like really long, low slung, but a sedan, sort of more of a luxury vehicle than a performance vehicle. Although I'm sure, as with any concept car, they can just give it any performance they want, but they haven't announced that much the Grand Sphere yet.
I'm excited to hear more about this. I think Audi's really kind of being very un-Audi like in some ways. They're like kind of getting out there out of their comfort zone.
Yeah, they are. I mean, they're charging full speed ahead with EVs, and so I'm glad to see they're out there trying things, throw stuff at the walls, and see what sticks. Probably won't be that change in wheelbase, but it might be some other element from these concepts. I mean, if you look at the e-tron GT, looks very much like the concept car, and the other e-tron vehicles have looked very much like their concept vehicles. So they're testing out some real world looks and performance with this stuff, even if they do some wacky things here and there. So yeah, it's exciting to see what they're thinking of and exploring and experimenting with. It should be cool.
Sounds good. Well, we could leave it there. I think that's a good way to sum up the podcast. If you enjoy the podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Android, wherever you get your podcasts. Send us your Spend My Monies. That's podcast@autoblog.com. Be safe out there, and we'll see you next week.